you can look at your competitors and see what they're doing and see what's coming up for searches when you type in a certain query. That's sort of the blindfolded approach, right? You don't really know exactly what's going on. You're getting a little piece of that topic cluster. And so a better thing to do is to look at the content, extract out all those entities, do the entity disambiguation, and then once we have the entities on that page, we can go out to our knowledge graph and we can pull back, what are the expert topics for the top entities in this page. Now we have an algorithm called the Spotlight Focus, which mirrors our keyword-based market focus algorithm.
Yep.
And that Spotlight Focus, it essentially starts out with the named entities, and it ends up with a basket of entities that are weighted according to not only just the entities that we found, but also the citation structure. We call it incoming anchor text.
Right.
And that's basically what's happening is we're going out and scoring every single link that goes to this page. We understand the anchor text that's coming through there, and that actually allows us to weight any entities that are in that anchor text appropriately. And then with the Spotlight Focus, we add one additional thing where we're actually, these entities are boosted over other entities found on the same page if they're related. So we are essentially starting with a page, we find the topic cluster, the entities that are sharing that in that topic cluster typically will get weighted more than an entity that just mentioned that has no relation to it. It could be mentioned 10 times on the page, but it doesn't matter because it's not related to any of the other entities on that page, right? So the Spotlight Focus algorithm uses these named entities combined with the incoming anchor text to this page, and then generates a basket of entities that the search engine thinks the page is about. So when a user queries the search engine, there's a Spotlight Focus score that gets generated for each ranking page. And this is sort of a sub-score in the semantic basket of scoring for a search engine result page in our model. And so this in turn contributes to the overall semantic score, which contributes to the overall query score that is the final determining factor in overall ranking. And of course, this Spotlight Focus algorithm, you may say, well, how do you know if this works or not? Well, we don't really. When we introduce algorithms, what we're doing is we're trying to sort of statistically model the concept behind this, right? And we allow our particle swarm optimization process. There's a genetic algorithm process that allows us to calibrate the weighting and the bias and weight settings on all these different algorithms in our model. And so in some cases, the Spotlight Focus score may have zero to little impact for that search result page, or it may have a very drastic impact. We don't try to guess at that. We just allow this genetic algorithm to sort of assign meaning and weight to that specific score. So that's the building block, right? So we're talking about how, where do we start? We're getting the named entities out of the page. And we're doing it in a smart way, right? We're not just going to say, give me all the entities on the page. We want to bring in some other outside signals that allow us to filter down and make it a little more accurate. So one of it is the incoming anchor text. This is extremely hard to do because to do the incoming anchor text, you have to score every single individual link. Additionally, we take the topic clustering, which we just talked about. That gives us a little bit more smarter way of looking at things, and we out comes sort of a basket of entities that the page really truly is usually about. The general goal is to come up with this E and EAT, right? The expertise algorithm. So to help that process, we'll take the top Spotlight Focus entities, and these become the basis for all of the expert content that we'd like to see if an expert was writing about this content. And for each Wikipedia citation page, an abstract is pulled from these and added to sort of a master list of content. So you get this graph of content that are all based off of sort of the top meaning of this page. And if you pull the abstracts of all that content, you sort of have what you would be looking at if you had an expert do a thesis on this specific topic. The big delineation between Market Brew and some of those tools is our link graph, right? So we have this very powerful link graph. It takes a lot of complex calculations to actually achieve this. And
not just context. It uses
and if you're missing that, you kind of miss this context. And generally, what that means in applied practice is you're gonna as a content writer, if you look at it without that additional filtering, you're gonna have a much more generalized, bigger graph or list of content that you think you have to write about.
Very specific topics. So I agree. There's so many writers sometimes that are like, well, I know this word is important in the phrase, so I'm going to emphasize that word in context. And you're just like, whoa, you're going way too broad, right? Let's focus just on this one thing, and the different things that people are looking for when they're searching for that one thing, what their needs are, what they want, what they hate about the competition, what people are saying in reviews about, the particular product or service. There's so many different angles that you could look at to be specific about what the person's looking for. And you're right. I think too many writers just go way too broad because they don't know any better. And the fact that you can actually get it down to exactly what we need to be specific and not watered down, I think that's amazing.
In our models, you can just look at the outperformer for the spotlight focus, and you could just simply copy them, right? That would just at least close the gap and make you an outperformer as well in that part of the search engine model. So Market Brew uses all this, a basket of content from these expert topics to check against the actual content on that target page, and then the score is sort of determined based off of how much coverage that is. Now, this depends on the context of the search engine result page, right? Mm-hmm. So some expertise scores, if you score 10% of that content, you might be an outperformer for that search. Other searches, you may have to score 70 to 80%. And you might ask yourself, well, why is that so different? Well, first of all, if you just abstractly think about it, there are certain industries that are more important that you have expertise writers, right? Health, legal, stuff like that, versus something else. On a more technical level, some topics just have such a huge corpus of content that there's really no way that anyone's going to be covering 70 to 80%. Really something good. In this case right here, Nintendo has their Nintendo Switch page is between 14 and 15%, right? And of course, you would think that Nintendo has like the perfect expertise score, but it actually doesn't. So you can actually, in this model specifically, PC Magazine and Amazon are actually outranking the brand Nintendo Switch in this part of the search engine model. The Nintendo Spotlight Focus Basket has a distribution because you have the entity Nintendo, and it drops off precipitously. It's just basically focused on Nintendo. There's this handheld play entity that's weighted about 20% of the value of the top Nintendo entity. And then you've got all these like other entities that are basically, think of it as like a long tail, right? If you go to the PC Mag or the corresponding Amazon target page that scores better in this part of the model, you'll see that not only do they have the Nintendo entity, but they also have a Nintendo Switch entity in there. They have Joy-Con. They have a bunch of different things that are focused in on the Nintendo Switch keyword, and not so much spaced out with this long tail list of other like games and stuff like that. It's more focused, if you want to think of it that way. That's why we call it the Spotlight Focus.
Got it.
PC Mag, that their top one is Nintendo and the Switch, and again Joy-Con, Virtual Console. They even talk about Xbox and a couple other things, but if you look at the distribution, there's more focus on the meat of the distribution for these keywords. Sort of the concept of encompassing as much of that topic cluster as possible. The way that we like to present this to users is we will actually give them access to our knowledge graph, right? So you could do this also just by going to Wikipedia and sort of manually kind of traversing all this stuff. But like in the Market Brew model, you can actually see all of these entities that these experts would write about, And in this case right here, if you hover over these entities, we'll actually give you the coverage of each individual subtopic. So for Nintendo, when we talked about handheld play, or
that could be a whole page of its own, and you could deep link it from that parent page and create a whole silo of content.
It's truly a very complex mathematical calculation, especially when you start bringing in the incoming anchor text, right? So this alone, you can't just look at the content and the named entity extraction and do all that, entity disambiguation and get all that right, and not include the citation structure around it. That's one of the things that we sort of proved out in R&D when we built out our Spotlight focus algorithm. One of the link algorithms has to do with the relevancy of the anchor text to the target page, right?
Yep.
And so what defines relevancy, right? We have to understand what the content is of that target page. What's that spotlight focus of that content on the target page, and then compare it to the anchor text that's linking to it. If it's very relevant, then that signal, at least one of those link algorithms, is going to push more link flow through those individual links versus a non-related anchor text, right? But if the spotlight focus is dependent on the link algorithms and the link scoring, but the link scoring is now dependent on the spotlight focus for its relevancy, at least for the relevancy part of the link algorithms. You can imagine, we've got we have a recursive nature to this.
And we talked about, the way that it's not just about, using what we see in the search results and what's on those pages, but understanding the knowledge graph of, the citations that are going into the sources, where we're pulling the data to come up with what we should be writing about is so, what's the word I want to use? It's so meta, right? It's so much depth in what we need to understand about what we should be writing about if we want to maximize what we're doing in search. And even if we're successful with some of the broader strategies and legacy ways of doing SEO, we're probably still just barely scratching the surface of what we're able to do, and how we're able to sustain our rankings by making sure that we've addressed everything that we believe Google will be looking for as a signal.